Good evening, San Fernando. It's it's always a pleasure to be in this southern capital, whether it's for carnival, for politics. Just being in San Fernando always lifts my spirit. Let me say thank you very much to the management and team here at Skiffle for lending us your very um, perfect location for an event like this. I must apologize for what happened at Panorama, but it had nothing to do with it. You know how the judges are. But tonight, we are here for what we call conversation with the Prime Minister, meaning that it's an opportunity for the Prime Minister representing the leadership of the government to raise a number of issues which we believe should be part of the national conversation and to give an opportunity to the population, the few of you who may get in on the uh, digital page, or those of you present here, to ask one or two questions on some of the issues that I may mention or something that you might have come with. What these conversations have shown is that um, it allows certain things to become ventilated in the public domain and the population benefit from the facts that may flow from that. So tonight, I would like to crave your indulgence to comment on about 10 or 12 items that have attracted or are attracting the attention of the government, and then I will stop. That will take me about 30, 35 minutes. We will be here for 2 hours until 10 o'clock. So after I've made those introductory comments on the various issues that I think should be of interest to you, the floor will then be open, and you may respond in expanding on what I raise or raise anything new that you may think should attract our attention tonight. This is not the only night. I propose to do this fairly regularly going forward, so we will have some more opportunities. So if your issue is not dealt with tonight or not dealt with sufficiently expansively, we may have other opportunity to engage it again later on. So let's use tonight to do a bit of reflection, because out of that reflection will come hopefully some education. I want to start the reflection by mentioning to you that I've been the Prime Minister of this country for almost 9 years. And during that time, a lot has happened. But throughout that period, I have focused steadfastly on the welfare and the well-being of the people, all the people of Trinidad and Tobago. It's been a period when we have experienced something that we've never experienced before. We had an election in 2000 after a 5-year term in office. I keep saying 2000, 2020. And look at where we are tonight, sitting here in the open, close to one another, and about to talk about the economy. But I want to remind you all that in 2020, March 2020, as Prime Minister, I had to take the decision to lock this country down and lock the world out, because we were in a pandemic and it shut down the economy of Trinidad and Tobago, and I dare say the world. And that wasn't all. We were losing lives left, right, and center. And of course, even that situation and the actions we took to protect lives could not please everybody. There were many persons who were displeased with a lot of the action that we took to save lives. And I want to remind you, we were trying to save lives because not knowing what was killing us. It took a while before the world understood the nature of the virus and the course that it would take and the level of mutation and so on. In the meantime, our factories were closed, our schools were closed. We kept the energy sector going because without that, we were going to starve. However, we've got past that. And tonight I can tell you that the decisions that we made between March 2020 and today have seen us with the economy virtually back to, and in some situations better than we were in 2019. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come a long way and the decisions have worked. But there were difficult decisions to make. Prior to 2020, there was another decision that we had to make. The accounting system of the world had changed, the Western world, I should say, and companies were no longer allowed to hide losses on their books and carry it forward as collectibles. You had to write off the losses that you were carrying, and that write-off had to be done in a very short period of time. You couldn't just be. One of our companies was carrying billions of dollars in debt, losses on their books, as though it was revenue to be collected. And in 2018, I think it was, or 2017, had to write it off so that their accounts will not be qualified. That company was Petrotrin. And of course, the assessment of the company going forward with a record like that, and oil production aiming to be at 60,000 barrels a day, and losing between $7 and $15 a barrel, and those are US dollars, the forecast for us was a loss of about $5 billion in the period between then and now. 2018 to 2023, we would have lost minimum $5 billion at that company. We took some action to prevent that. And also, we had a debt to pay. We had a check to write in August of 2018 of $850 million US dollars, failing which we would have defaulted. And if we defaulted on that debt, cross-default arrangements would have meant that we would have defaulted on many more debts, and the country would have been in the hands of the IMF, and the devaluation would have been with us, and the economy would have been collapsed. We prevented that by restructuring the company. We shut the refinery down. We created Heritage. Heritage operations from those actions put us in a position of profit from the oil we were producing. Heritage allowed the company, the parent company, to refinance the debt and is servicing the debt and is putting a few hundreds of millions of dollars in the kitty at the Ministry of Finance, taking that responsibility from the Minister of Finance. Suffice it to say that had those decisions not been made and had they not been successful, the Minister of Finance, the Exchequer, the Treasury, would have been responsible for that Petrotrin debt, and that would have bankrupted the country. And the only way the government could have run the country, that situation, was to devalue the currency, something horrible. We avoided that. But of course, you know all the conversations that went with that. Some people made a career over that, but the bottom line is, that was 2018. It's now 2023. We have survived that. The decisions have worked. I could tell you from a situation in dealing with a pandemic, that during that pandemic, many people who made a career of bad-mouthing the health system in Trinidad and Tobago would have seen, in comparison to other countries in the world, that Trinidad and Tobago was right out front, being able to protect its population by its technical staff and the professionalism and the infrastructure we had in the country, and we handled COVID more than many countries, bigger countries, richer countries, and we came through. That was how we did it. So our health system today is functioning quite well. It's not perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, very few things are perfect. I know a lot of churches where things are not perfect. I know a lot of families where things are not perfect. Trinidad and Tobago is not a perfect place, but by God, for us, it's the best place in the world. And governments are not only required to make easy decisions. In fact, you judge a government by its ability to make the tough decisions. That's how you judge a government. If anybody could do it, then it's easy. But if it takes a certain amount of rectitude and fortitude to make the tough decisions, and your government could make those decisions and make them in the public interest and come out of it better than when the decisions had to be made, then you know you're doing something right. And I could tell you, notwithstanding all that you're hearing and seeing in Trinidad and Tobago, there's a lot that is being done right in Trinidad and Tobago. But as we sit here tonight, all of us, every single one of us, traumatized, harassed, threatened by the misbehavior of a small number of people who engage in violent criminal conduct. Our country has a serious crime problem. It's on the news every day. It makes you wonder, who produced all these murderers who every night there are 2 or 3 people to be murdered in the daytime, in the evening, in the morning? People are being murdered in our country by a small number of people. They are not the average person in Trinidad and Tobago. They're threatening every single one of us. And therefore, our national security system had to work time and a half, overtime, quadruple to face that, and our whole of government response, whether it's in the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Social Services, the Ministry, the Office of the Prime Minister, dealing with family affairs and women and so on, we have to respond from every facet of this rough diamond to treat with the violent crime in our country, and we have been doing that. It is not easy. It has not been easy. It is not done. We have to stay engaged, because as I talk to you now, I wouldn't be surprised if when we leave here tonight, we hear that somebody killed somebody tonight. That's what we're facing. But we have to stay engaged, and the decisions continue. We just made one a couple nights ago. We had to intervene in one of our state agencies to take unusual decisions. I know many of you don't know why. I couldn't tell you everything that we know, but we have to act on everything we know, and we trust that it will work out well. We have confidence that it will. Your government is not an irresponsible government. You don't see us doing this every day. You see us doing it when it is required. And this government, putting the public interest first, sticking to our oath of office, to act without fear or favor, without malice or ill will, taking the decisions that have to be taken. In education, the Minister of Education can talk to you for an hour tonight, but she doesn't have the time to tell you that we made a dramatic change in our scholarship system, moving from funding every scholarship fully and opening to the outside, and only giving 100 scholarships in a particular way for performance, but supporting a lot more people with bursaries, using the same budget, putting very many more people through universities, doing more with less. We are doing more today with less money, getting our top students through university than we were doing before. In some instances, to train a doctor in Ireland was over $1 million. To train the same doctor in St. Augustine, you could train 3 or 4. So what do? We allow within the 100 in that scholarship program, if you are in that 100, then we allow you to go abroad if you choose to, and we carry that bill only from the 100 cohort. But the other 200 or 300, we have St. Augustine, we have Mona, and we have Grenada, and we're producing the doctors. So you would have heard Oh, many people spend a lot of time talking about how many potholes we have in the roads in our country and how our roads are worse in the world. We admitted that when we had to shut the economy down, when we had to fight COVID, when we had other priorities like paying public servants, we did give road repair a lower position on the totem pole of priorities. But now we have a road paving program going on now in this country that has never been done in Trinidad and Tobago before, all over the country. Roads are being repaired, refurbished, reconstructed. And I invite you, take a drive. Many of you have cars. Take a drive through the country. Go out and see your neighbors and your friends elsewhere and see how many roads. The ministry publishes something on weekends as to where the roads have been published. All over the country, we are prioritizing the main roads, the side roads, the small roads, the big roads, and there's an ongoing program. Before it was said, when you see road paving, it means election coming. Well, there has been no election this year, and we're paving more roads this year so far than we paved before. Because now we've got to the point where we can direct more resources and more of our effort to that program of our deteriorated roads. Order in what we are doing. But coming back to crime, we in the parliament tried to get agreement. When we were in the opposition, we supported a lot of efforts by the parliament to change laws and introduce laws and so on to try to give the police and other agencies the ability to have the advantage over the criminal element. Unfortunately, the other side don't see things that way. They see being in a situation in the country where crime is rampant and it appears as though we don't have a solution that works well for their election campaign. But we can't let that control what we do. So initially, we tried to encourage them to agree. Even things that they brought to the parliament, they would not support. Because to support it is to make the government look good. There are people in this country who actually take that position. And in this era, where the criminals are all over the place, because there was a time when violent crime and criminality and murder was Laventil. Crime as a business has now permeated the whole country, so it's all over the country. From seizures to carnage, from Sandugandi to Scarborough. There are young people in particular who are choosing crime as a way of life. And if you don't believe that, I'm only expressing my view. There are people in this country who are choosing criminal conduct as a way of life. And they have to be brought to heel by the state security agencies. But this is 2023. While we are trying to control that, there are other people who spend their time arguing that we will be better off, and we are better off if we succeed in granting bail for murder. Fact. So now, whether you like it or not, murderers can get bail. I want to say something to this country. The English laws that we inherited, that we're trying to be the best at interpreting, are for the English society. Once we decide it is for our society, we better understand that there are going to be some serious shortcomings. So now we are concerned, more concerned about those who have been convicted in the jail. But I don't see any concern for the witnesses who got them in the jail, who got them convicted, who now have to live on the same street with the murderer who has got bail and who knows who got them there. I'm just telling you as Prime Minister that there are people who are in mortal fear now and approaching the Prime Minister. What can the Prime Minister do? Mortal fear of living where they live now, because the people that they managed to get behind bars, convicted for murder, there was a time when they would have been executed and be history. Now they're back on the street facing them. That is the reality of 2023. Same thing with bail, the revolving door. And of course, if witnesses are put in that situation, who wants to be a witness in this country where if you are a witness and you manage to get somebody convicted for murder, when they come out, as they will, because nowadays they're out. So some of us want to get the criminals in, that's our effort. There are others who want to get them out, that's their effort. But we pass on from that. I want to draw your attention to the work that was done by this government in 2016, 2017, 2018. We enjoy the quality of life that we have based largely, not only, but largely on our earnings, starting with oil, and then later with gas, and then now still with gas and a little bit of oil. The earnings from the hydrocarbon sector is what pays the public debt, because we've been borrowing money for decades. We owe a lot of money every month, every week. We have to pay the various debts. And we also have to pay public servants who have been getting an increased salary over the decades. You move from here to there. My first salary was $169 a month. Gazetted public servant. My first salary was $169. That same salary now pays probably $12,000 or $13,000. That same office. So we have debt, rollover debt, keep going with that. When we came into office, we met a situation that I want this country to understand. Gas production was going down because of the age and extraction levels in our fields. Oil production had gone down. And the contracts for selling, let's talk about gas. The contracts for selling gas were hinged against something called Henry Hub, which is a place in the United States where gas trading is referenced. A port where LNG is traded against the prices paid there, Henry Hub. So when you look in the newspapers and you see gas price, Henry Hub, it's not. Our contracts were against Henry Hub. And Henry Hub references were in the order of, in recent times, approximately $2 or just more than $2 per unit. But there was a time, 2008, 2009, that period, when that same unit of gas was selling for over $10 US dollars. And on one occasion, it got as high as 13. So we earned a lot of money in that period, 2007, 2008, and things started to change in 2009. Today, the reference point at Henry Hub is $1.93, $1.93. Our budgeted price is $5. Has any of you thought about that in the last week, in the last month, in the last year? That we budgeted at $5 a unit. Henry Hub is $1.93. And I'm not even mentioning our declining gas production by volume. Has any of you thought, how are we managing to make it? You know how we're managing to make it? That the government that you elected in 2015 saw the danger of this and decided to do something about it in 2016, 2017, and by 2018, we set about led by the Prime Minister and the Minister of Energy, who was appointed a minister in the office of the Prime Minister. So together, we set about to engage the people who own those contracts. And I made so many trips abroad, ate so many hotel food, lived out of a suitcase so many days in so many cities, London, Amsterdam, Houston, Washington, to convince these people to agree with us to not use Henry Hub as our reference. But we were able to do a number of things because it had to be done by agreement, because the contracts were in place and we couldn't force anybody to change the contract terms. We did not break a single contract, but we renegotiated, and we're the only country in the world that was able to do that. We renegotiated and got them to agree to different terms and conditions. As a result of that, our gas sales are now not referenced only against Henry Hub, but against the European market and the Asian market. There's a basket and the average price in there, with Henry Hub being 193 today. The renegotiated arrangements that we were able to get done, so far, we have got about $17 billion more than we would have got if we had stayed at Henry Hub. And even as the market today is 193, by the time you use the new reference arrangements with at least one of the major companies, even though you're seeing 193 as the reference price, the price against which we are extracting our earnings is about $3.50, $3.40. I don't want to go into any details like that, but I could tell you that as a result of the renegotiation that we have been able to conclude, we have changed our earnings depending on what's happening in the market from between 20, 30, or as high as 40% more than we would have got. And that is how we have managed to keep Trinidad and Tobago whole. So while some people spend all their time talking about who killed who, and that the government is not doing anything, and that the government is useless, the government was saving this country by doing what we had to do to be in a position earning more from less. That's what we had to do. That's what we've done. And the arrangements that we put in place, not the least of which is the restructuring of the ownership of Atlantic LNG, where we've lost because Train 1 has been shut down. Our ownership was 10% in Train 1 and 11% in Train 4. That was something that wasn't even known by the previous Prime Minister. Had to come to the Parliament to ask shareholding in the various trains. We had no shareholding in Train 2 and none in Train 3. So as the gas production fell, the first train to be removed was the oldest train, Train 1. So our 10% was now in danger. We wanted to stay at the table to renegotiate the structure of ownership in there. So we spent $34 million to keep Train 1 in the play to allow us to be at the table to negotiate. And we successfully negotiated an ownership of 10% across the board on Train 2, Train 3. So today, we have ownership 10%, Train 2, Train 3, and 11% and 10% in Train 4. And now that Train 1 has gone out of the picture, in the negotiations, we were able to renegotiate and recover that initial money. When we did that, many of you would have heard, there's one of them from Naparima and one of them from Pointe-à-Pitre, the one on the $1 billion bail. They were telling you that we spent $400 million and the money is lost, and they were, just pray God that they wasn't in office. Because I don't know what would have happened to Trinidad and Tobago had they been in office, because they would not have and they could not have done what we did to keep this country whole and to restructure it in the way that we have. So when all the negatives have to flow And the government has to be bad-mouthed by those who only do that. I want the conversation to spread to what we have accomplished. And I want you to ask yourself, what would have been our position today if the government did not have the foresight and the competence and the commitment to the people of Trinidad and Tobago to hit the road, to make the changes, to stay the course, and to get it done, so that today we are earning more revenues from less gas. And if we were only confined to that revenue from that volume of gas with the contracts that were in place, by now, the currency would have been devalued by at least 60%, and the IMF would have been our partner a long time ago. But I gave this country the commitment in 2016, in 2015, September, that we will do whatever has to be done, but we will not find ourselves with an IMF program. And to the extent that there was bitter medicine to be had, we admitted that there was bitter medicine to be had, but we will be in control of the bitterness of that medicine, and we'll be in control of the dosage. We have done that, this government has done that, and in Trinidad and Tobago, we have stayed clear of an IMF program. I see some of the loudmouths in this country, especially among parliamentarians, who are always praising other Caribbean countries and comparing and contrasting them with Trinidad and Tobago, countries that are in IMF programs, countries that have been in an IMF program for decades. I see people comparing that with Trinidad and Tobago. Countries that are in an IMF program now, where if they want to spend $10 on a baby or on a house or on a road, they have to get permission to do it. Last week I was in Guyana at a heads of government conference, and there's a bill to be paid in national security where all of us make a contribution to pay. One of our Caribbean countries had to ask for a blight because we just can't spend money, so we had to get, some permission. The Commonwealth, the CARICOM Development Fund has to be funded by the various CARICOM countries, with Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and Guyana paying the most into the fund. We are not in the IMF program, and it's not by accident, it's not by happenstance, it is by the policy of the government of Trinidad and Tobago to take a different course in looking after our own business. That's what it is. And I want to come back to crime again because that seems to be the flavor of the month. The opposition, the president said that she would like to see the opposition and the government come together and work on this crime issue. You know why the president would have said that? Because the president would have seen that when the government tries to do anything about crime in this country, there's one part of the parliament saying, let us do this, and the other part saying, we want no part of that. That's what the president saw. The president didn't tell us to go and have meetings all over the place together to look as if we are partners in crime. The president said, I would like to see that when matters relating to fighting crime come up, that all of you, all 41 of you, stick to your oath of office. That's what the president did. So there was a feeling that maybe if the two sides, or the three sides, because there are three sides of the parliament, one is independent and should not be drawn into the political arena. But if we talk about what is ailing us, because up to that point, we had 8 years of lack of cooperation. So we said, okay, let's talk to see if the matters that are ailing us or keeping us away from decision making, if there's some way we could talk about it to get ourselves closer to it. We agreed. And as Prime Minister, I identified a very powerful team from the government. 4 members. Because we said we don't want the whole parliament, you don't want the whole string band. So I appointed 4 people. And I said, well, both sides will come with whoever they come with. And of course, the Attorney General would be the convener, and he will chair it. He will convene the meetings, and we'll have some discussions to see if those things that we could not find common ground on, whether there's any possibility. I did that within a week of that being agreed as the way to go. Up to this day, the opposition has not named anybody. I want to repeat that. Up to this day, the opposition has not named anybody to sit down with the government team to discuss the matters that we are all very familiar with. But yet I have people telling me that the reason why the opposition is not doing that is because I am not part of the team. That sounds like sense to you? But they're sitting down with Chastenay as if St. Lucia, who had Chastenay in their government to run their country, throw him out of office unceremoniously, but in Trinidad to try to tell us how to run Trinidad. No thanks, Tropical Trump. But it just shows you where some people's interests are and where your government interests and your government's day work is. You hear from some other people, and I'll just stop in 5 minutes. You hear from some other people that the problem with the country is the Constitution. The Constitution. There are 2 words in this country that are used very liberally by everybody. But I guarantee you, most of them have never read the Constitution, and most of them do not know what democracy means, even though Dr. Williams spelled it out. Imagine being told that if the parliament doesn't convene to allow an acting deputy commissioner to act as commissioner in the police service because the commissioner has to go abroad for 2 days, that is an erosion of our democracy. What does democracy have to do with it? It is common sense. You have this nonsense negotiated by them, because Mr. Imbot will tell you, I was never approving of that. That you end up with a situation where for years we couldn't appoint a commissioner of police. It was only when we came into government in 2015, one of the first things we had to do was to change the law and make amendments to the regulations to be able to appoint a commissioner of police. And even as we did that, they took us to court and spent time and money in court trying to prevent us from being able to start the process to appoint a commissioner of police. And in that whole hoodle-doodle, you can't have anybody act as commissioner of police from the 3 or 4 deputy commissioners. That must be done by the parliament. That is foolishness. It is not management sense. In every company in this country, in every state enterprise, if somebody who is in charge is going abroad, the next person in line or somebody senior will act for a few days. But no, the Deputy Commissioner of Police can't act as Commissioner of Police unless the Parliament vote on it. I have had enough of this obstructive nonsense. And you, the population, must understand that these are the things that they want, because they know when they do that, it guarantees that nothing will be done. And that's the election campaign. The government in office represents the people arising out of an election. We, in an election campaign, say to you, the people, that we are going to have a manageable, affordable property tax system in this country. where you pay a contribution into a tax that is worldwide and accepted over generations. I was paying that tax when I was 17 years old, $1.44 for the land on which my house is built in Tobago. And I always knew if I didn't pay that 144, I could lose the property. But the government that campaigned on that, won the election, came into office, and decided to put the policy in place. We have had to fight in the courthouse for, 6 years or 7 years to prevent a matter that was the subject of an election campaign where the government has a mandate. The same thing with the Revenue Authority. And I will end on this note. Anybody who knows anything about our country's economy will know that there was a study that was done that showed that there was approximately $15 billion in taxes that are to be collected under the existing laws. I'm not talking about levying new taxes on anybody. I'm saying taxes that are owed under the existing laws, being evaded by people who are better off than most of you in this gathering here tonight. And when we studied it, brought in outsiders, used local talent, and we decided by policy that we'll have a revenue authority that will more competently collect those taxes to be able to develop the country and to spend it on you as against on the person who is hiding and evading the taxes. You have people in the parliament and union to boot, obstructing the government. How many years now in the courthouse over that? 2 years. And they've lost every time they come into court. They know they're going to lose, But the delay, have it in the court. I was just looking through the history of this matter recently. I think the Minister of Finance knows it offhand. Minister of Finance, could you tell the country where that property tax and that revenue authority has passed through the courthouse? Is there a mic for the Minister of Finance? I will stop at this point and let the Minister of Finance clarify this for you, because I want you to understand. I want you to understand that as the government with the mandate to do certain things for the benefit of this country, that there are people who are using the courts to bring about delay so it will not be done, and they believe that if they obstruct that, the government will not be able to be successful in the matters that we have engaged, like we were with fighting COVID, with the Petrotrin restructuring, with the road improvement program. They just believe that they could use the court to create delays. And I want the actual delay to be told to you now so you can see what is going on. But we have still kept our policy. There will be the collection of property tax, and there will be a revenue authority. So we fight these fights one after the other in the courthouse, and we win every single one of them. And while the Minister of Finance is looking for the information on his phone, I could tell you, when we were fighting COVID and in the hospital trying to save lives, there were 63 cases in the courthouse we had to fight to, They've lost every one. But they were trying to use the court to prevent the government from fighting a virus and a pandemic because they believe that the government must not be allowed to succeed. Minister of Finance, please take over.
Thank you very much. Good night, all. Honorable Prime Minister, my colleagues. The TTRA bill was first brought to the Parliament in early 2010, January of 2010.
And who was in government then?
Pardon?
Who was in government then?
PNM.
January 2010.
January 2010.
Good.
PNM, under the Manning administration. It required a special majority because you were creating a new agency that had the powers to investigate taxes. The then opposition, UNC opposition, refused to support the Revenue Authority, even though they knew what the benefits would be in terms of the collection of taxes. New government came in May 2010. They shelved it. They decided it was a bad idea to try to create a new agency that could be more efficient in collecting those billions of dollars of taxes that are outside the system, that people who should pay taxes are not paying taxes. Because in Trinidad and Tobago, a significant number of income earners, and I'm not talking about individuals per se, but a significant number of income earners don't pay any taxes. They don't declare income, they don't pay taxes. And that puts the burden on you, the honest and legitimate taxpayer. Anyhow, 5 years and 3 months passed. The previous government decided they wanted to have nothing to do with that. We came into government again in September 2015. We put into our 2015 manifesto that one of the most pressing priorities for us would be the establishment of a revenue authority. We spent a couple of years dealing with the legislation. It required a special majority. We brought the bill to Parliament. We sent it to a joint select committee. The opposition insisted that if they would support it and give us the special majority, they needed to consult with stakeholders. So we spent 2 years consulting with stakeholders, everybody who had anything to do with collection of revenue, the public service, the trade union came, the business associations came, everybody came. 2 years. Went back to the Parliament, brought the bill to the Parliament, opposition refused to accept the bill. All right, election came, 2020, we're going back again. They say no again. So we eventually had to, I wouldn't call it water it down, but we had to modify the legislation to make it a simple majority bill. And the way we did that is that the sort of police powers of the Inland Revenue Division and the Customs and Excise Division are going to remain in the public service, the police powers, which is investigation, entry, search, seizure, and so on. But the administrative side of revenue collection, which is where the inefficiency was, will now be handled by a purpose-built, efficient statutory authority, which can hire people with the necessary skills, will not be subject to the delays by the Public Service Commission, and so on. So we passed that bill, 2021. 2022, within a couple of months, they're going to court again. They said the bill is unconstitutional, the act is unconstitutional. And we've been in the court with them for almost 2 years. They lost in the High Court, they lost in the Court of Appeal, they're gone to the Privy Council. And while we are there seeking to implement this new agency, they keep applying for an injunction. So as the thing has gone all the way to the Privy Council to determine whether it is constitutional, they won't allow us to implement the Revenue Authority because they keep applying to the court to stop us. But we're pressing on. We won in the High Court, and we expect a decision from the Court of Appeal on the matter. This is the injunction matter in the near future. And if all goes according to plan, God willing, we will succeed. I can't say what the court will do, but the High Court judgment was a very strong judgment. So we are continuing. But look at the amount of time. 14 years to implement an agency that would bring in billions of dollars in revenue for the country for the betterment of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. That is the Revenue Authority. But we're pressing on. With respect to property tax, the government of the day, 2009, 2010 again, went to Parliament to change from a system of land and building taxes to property tax. The opposition refused to support it. An election was imminent. The bill lapsed. New government come in. And for 5 years and 3 months, they decided not to collect any land and building taxes or property taxes of any kind. We came back in 2017, we started the process of gathering information on properties so that we could develop a valuation role so that we could collect property tax. And the purpose of this tax is to give it to your local government bodies so that they can improve your local infrastructure. That's what it's for. And we pass a law to say that residential property taxes are to go to local government bodies for the service of the people who live within the corporations. 2017, court, high court, appeal court, injunction. So we've been going at it from 2017 to now, 6 years, being with attempts every step of the way to block us in the courts. But we're pressing on. We're pressing on. We have learned along the way. We are dotting every I and crossing every T. So this is why we've been successful in the legal action so far with respect to that matter. But they've delayed us for 6 years on one and 14 years on the other.
All I will say to that is that if this obstruction succeeds and we are not able to position ourselves to make the most of every opportunity on the revenue side in this country, we face the danger of entering into a period where the government of Trinidad and Tobago will not be able to meet its expenses, and we will not be the first government that has to face that. We will not be the first country that finds itself in that situation. Much as we are trying to avoid that ever happening to us, if we continue with what you heard from the Minister of Finance there, and had we not been the government since 2015 to do what we have done on the revenue side, the crapo would have had the pipe in his mouth a long time ago, and the match would have been struck to smoke it. Ladies and gentlemen, these are serious matters. These are not matters to be taken lightly, whether you are a businessman, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a nurse, you're a doctor, you're a taxi driver. If the country's business is handled in the way that we have been fighting to prevent it from being handled, we're going to come to a point where we will not be able to preserve and afford and sustain the quality of life that we had become accustomed to. Because I could say to you without fear of contradiction, had this government not taken the positions that we have taken in the last 9 years, given the level of expenditure that was taking place in 2015, and given the fact that revenues fell from $60 billion budget to $38 billion, we would have been an IMF case already. And once you start talking IMF, you start talking about one, reducing all subsidies and cutting the public service, its numerical strength significantly. The government expenses, the major government expenses, are three of them. One is public debt. And you better pay that, because if you default, it's going to hit you in your pocket. The currency is going to be devalued. Two, we have to pay public servants. Every month, the Minister of Finance has to find a significant amount of money to ensure that public servants' checks don't bounce. And three, we pay subsidies on a number of expenditure items which are really for you, the citizen, but the government pays the bill. $1 billion on fuel still, notwithstanding what you've been hearing from some union leaders, we still carry $1 billion in subsidy on fuel. Water is heavily subsidized because that plant in Point Lisas, where we moved from our own water, the desal water, has bankrupted WASA. TNTech, your electricity bills are still about the cheapest in the world. And of course, your hospital care is free, and your schools are largely free except at the university where a contribution is made at the highest level. Those 5 things, if you end up anywhere near the IMF, that is where the change in this country will come. So understand, when we say we're not going to be an IMF candidate, we're going to do our own medicine. All the complaints that you're hearing will pale into insignificance if the attitude of other responsible people prevail and we end up having to expose this country's flanks on those 5 items. And priority number 1 is paying the public debt. Because if you don't pay the public debt, you're going to end up having to take on conditions that will allow you to have to deal structurally and drastically with the other expenses. And the first thing that they all look for when you can't manage your own affairs, your own finances, is they look at the value of your currency. We have had advice since September 2015 to devalue the currency. That was one of the advice we get from some of the experts. We said no, we could manage the country, and we wouldn't manage the country without devaluation. Because when you devalue the currency, sometimes when you start to devalue it, it's like a flywheel. It keeps spinning, you can't slow it down, you can't stop it. And secondly, it affects most those who are least able to afford. Those at the base of the earning pyramid, devaluations hurt you more, because devaluations mean you got to pay more for everything. I've said enough. Open the floor. Let's talk.
Reminder, ladies and gentlemen, that the microphones are placed here and here. A reminder to give your name and before you're giving your question.
Good evening, Prime Minister.
It would help and make it more interesting if you, as you give us your name, tell us generally where you're from, not your home address. Where you from? Coquier, Gulfview, Siparia. Tell us where you're from.
I'm Keith Belgrove, Belgrove's Funeral Home across the street.
Oh. Is that a good thing or a bad thing that we started with a funeral home? We're not dead yet, Keith.
Well, Prime Minister, my contributions this evening at all funeral service. I'm speaking on behalf of the association tonight. And on the hustings late last year, you made a commitment about your parliamentary agenda and the Funeral Services Act. We want to hold you to that commitment because it's desperately needed. We need to move from an industry to a profession playing our role in the development of Trinidad. So we beg for that act this year. Those who have prepared have done a good job in preparing, and we look forward for it. To the Minister of Finance, through you, on the importation of hearses, duties weighed very widely, 10%, 45%, 67.5%. But who pays that bill? The end user. On top of that, at importation, a hearse is considered a luxury vehicle, but at motor vehicular taxes, at licensing commission, it is a goods vehicle. There's a serious anomaly for examination. So if we can please, Minister of Finance, you'll be getting our correspondence on the matter. Prime Minister, I see you laughing. So clearly you have an answer to this. So that as well as, I want to raise one important point. The blind welfare has an office just up the street. Up to today, we stepped out of our building to help the blind cross because the pavements are not friendly to the differently abled. I want to suggest in this year's budget some little encouragement to the businesses of Trinidad and Tobago to make a change there with our pavements. Half of my pavement, and this week itself, I'm commissioning the second half of my pavement. So at least when they cross the front of my place, they won't get bounced down and end up coming by me. Thank you.
Thanks for your contribution.
Thank you, Mr. Belgrove. I think we have the Minister of Local Government here, who is also the Member of Parliament for where we are. And I would like to give him 23 seconds to respond to you, because I think he might be able to add something. And secondly, with respect to the safety and the crossing, we have the Minister of Works here, and I'm asking him to find out what's going on there with the crossings there, to see if we can very quickly, along with your colleague local government, we can do something about that.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister.
Let's hear from the Minister of Local Government first. I don't want to put the Minister of Finance in a position now to talk about duties on goods and luxury where a horse is involved, right? He will look at it away from here, right?
Thank you, Prime Minister. Very
Yes.
quickly, Mr. Belgrove, good evening, sir. You know I worked with you for years in developing the law that you are referring to. So under my hand at Attorney General's office, we had done the consultation, very large island-wide consultation to create that law. The Law Reform Commission produced a paper, and the Honorable Attorney General has that in his possession now. So I'm sure you can expect that work to be concluded, but we spent years working on it. That, Prime Minister, shows that we have been there. Secondly, flowing from that, the Ministry of Finance gets the recommendations for the entire suite of services. So that was part of the consultative work we did with you when I was Attorney General. The aspect of the blind welfare, I have been to the blind welfare myself. It's in my constituency. I'm very familiar with the area. The mayor of the city is aware of the positions. We have worked on some crossing aspects. It falls between highways, but it's really a local authority road, which is local government, and the zebra crossings and the pavement works are programmed in our PSIP for this year, and you have my personal commitment that I will see that work through together with the mayor and the representatives of the city of San Fernando. Thank you, Prime Minister.
Thank you very much. Okay. Sorry we haven't been able to bring the law to the Parliament yet, but the work has been done. It's in the pipeline, it's close to the end. So sometime in the not too distant future, you will see us in the Parliament debating, having agreed with your position that the funeral industry needs this new law to regularize your operations. So it's happening. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, good evening, Honorable Prime Minister. My name is John Kisson. I have followed your journey, the party's journey, the government's journey from local government, from Minister Franklin Khan. He passed on the torch to Minister Hussein, who passed on the torch to Minister Al-Arawi. And during this time, I was able to become the local economic development officer for the city of San Fernando right now. My question to you is about local government reform. From your perspective, what is the highest priority of local government reform to be implemented? And how would your clarion call be to the private industries to partner with local government bodies towards accelerating local economic development across the 14 municipal corporations?
The highest priority is to get proper management and structures in there and the collection of property tax to be spent on the burgesses who pay those taxes. Because when you do that, as long as that is done, economic activity is generated at the local level in a way that it is not generated now. Also, the work of that expenditure at the local level will have the effect of improving the value of the properties that are affected by the positive work that will go on in the area. And the quality of life that will flow from improved conditions at the local level will reflect itself in people's wealth being increased. Let me give you an example. I was in Guyana last week with the president, And he pointed out to me as we drove along a particular district how property values have risen in the last 2 years simply because of the physical infrastructure. They have these canals and drains and so big drains. The work that's been done and the road improvement, the improved access and egress saw a significant uptick in the value of the property. So the owner's net worth would have grown simply by this aspect of implementation of public policy in a short space of time. We can have that in Trinidad and Tobago on a same kind of scale if we spend that money that will be collected. The numbers have been called by the Minister of Finance, and as well as other monies that can come to local government from the Treasury. But to be able to have a revenue stream is to put all the local government bodies with a leg up to do things that are not now being done, which everybody knows needs to be done. And if it is done, we will all benefit and we'll all be raised. All boats will be lifted by that rising tide.
This side.
Good evening, Mr. Prime Minister. I have two issues. I'm sorry.
Your name, yes.
I'm another Keith. My name is Keith Smith. I'm from Pleasantville. Okay, so your recent trip to Guyana, it was reported that the CCJ would have been discussed. I read that in the newspaper. I haven't heard what became of that or what came out of that discussions, if you all had any. And I'm wondering whether we can lobby to probably have the British chase us from the Privy Council. If that will be unconstitutional, I don't know. The other issue with the court, staying with the court, is that some of us are of the view that the judiciary is not playing its part in the fight against crime. Is there somehow that we can have them to account to the public, because they are an independent arm of government, the legislature does, the executive does, but for some reason, we are not getting the judiciary to account to the public on what they are doing with crime.
Thank you very much, Keith. We seem to be having a night of Keiths. First question, we did not really discuss the CCJ as an alternative to the Privy Council at the last meeting. The only item on the agenda which involved the CCJ was discussed in caucus, which means only the heads being in that meeting. And it had to do with the trust fund, which funds the judges who are on the court and having money available to be able to continue supporting judges going forward, because this is a sustainable arrangement we have in place. So if you were talking about the removal of the Privy Council as our final court of appeal, that did not come up in the last meeting, but it remains with us as a people. Whether there will be a day when our independence will be completed and Trinidad and Tobago, like Barbados, like India, like many other Commonwealth countries, will have its final court of appeal at home rather than in London. I know that there's different views, but eventually one day, what's his name from Guyana, Sir Sridhar Ramphal said, and we all believe it, one of these days we'll be asked to stop loitering on the steps of the Privy Council. When that day is, I don't know. And the other point you raised about the judiciary, I think that very many people believe that more can be done at the level of the judiciary. And this is not being critical of any particular judge or the judiciary as a structure, an entity of our governance. But we believe that there are times when we see certain decisions that the criminals smile. The general sentiment, I think, is that the criminals feel better off in the court than out on the street. Because sometimes one gets the impression that the care and attention of the rights of the criminal supersedes the trauma of the victim. And of course, in between those two positions, you have the advocates who present the good boys, who, if you meet them in the court, they're just like you. But when they meet you on the street and put a gun in your face, they're really a different description. We have to understand that a balance is required between protecting rights of the criminals as against protecting the rights of the victims. Law-abiding citizens really are feeling hard done by some of the decisions made in favor of criminals.
Next question on this side, please, on the line.
Good evening, Prime Minister, fellow citizens.
Good night.
My name is Mark, not Keith. I do apologize. First off, I'd like to thank you all for the innovation you all had to prevent the country from going through a headache with the oil industry. Oil itself has had a great impact on Trinidad. I know that back then, the issues of high labor costs, fluctuating oil prices, bad mismanagement would have led to that problem. Right now, technology has advanced in a certain level. We can now use stuff like industry automation, machine learning, AI. We also have a ready supply of oil from our neighbors, Guyana, Suriname, are coming. I wanted to know if it's possible that with an upgrade of the refinery, which is now being offered in the market to be sold to another party, if we would consider actually investing it on our own to use those factors to allow us to have a more efficient and productive solution to again have oil as being one of the major income earners for the country, if that would be considered once a proper plan is put in place.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me put it this way. There was a reason why we came out of the refining business. We are still in the oil business. We are still drilling for oil, looking for oil, finding oil, selling oil. We're still in the oil business. We're still buying refined products for use at home, and some we sell. I would be the happiest person in this country if we come to a situation where we can have refining done in the country. But the reason why we came out of the refining business is because there was not sufficient oil available to make refining a business that we should be involved in. Over time, we became a refiner, more of other people's oil than our own oil. And some of the culture and the systems we had in place, including the refineries and efficiency and other things like that, caused us to be a loser rather than a gainer. And while some people in the industry were benefiting, nationally, we were losing. I could tell you that in the search for the condition that you mentioned there, we are discovering there are refineries around the world. I was talking to somebody recently about a refinery in Africa, about the size and scale of the one in Point-à-Paix. When we closed down that refinery, we had to deal with about 5,000 people, I think, approximately 5,000 people. You know how many people are running that refinery in Africa that I'm talking about? 400. 400. And with the technologies that you mentioned there now, if a new refinery is being built, or if a refinery is being brought into operation using all the technology that's available, it will not be the kind of refinery that we have had to close, because the technology allows you to get the work done without that huge number of people, many of whom were not contributing to the bottom line of the company. Those are the facts. But we have no plan as a government to go back into the refining business, because the reason for coming out has not changed. We don't have a supply of oil to make the refining a business that we should be in. If anybody could come up with a requirement to use the refinery, and they have, one, a supply of oil to make it worthwhile, and two, the funding to operate the refinery, then the government is willing. So far, we found no person or entity that has that interest in refining. And that's what it is. And I want to point out again to you all, had we not come out of that refining business, we would have put a match to $5 billion between 2018 and now. But we still travel in hope that somewhere along the way, some entity who wants to get in the refining business and can use a used refinery may want to talk to us, or someone with oil who wants to get involved in the refining business may want to talk to us. We still travel in hope. We do not now have such interest in front of us. But we have a data room in Pointe-a-Pierre where any such person or entity could go and see what is available and determine whether their interest can be brought to bear on what we have there. So let's think positively, and maybe one day something might happen. But we did not close it to reopen it under the same conditions. Next.
Question from the next side. Please give your name.
Good evening, Honorable Prime Minister.
Good
My
night.
name is Kiran Singh. I'm the president of the Greater San Fernando Area Chamber of Commerce. And it's a pleasure to have you here this evening in our lovely city of San Fernando.
Thank you.
And I have three brief questions for you this evening, Honorable Prime Minister.
Could we take them one by one, please?
Sorry?
You have three questions.
Yes.
Ask them one by one, and I'll answer each one as you ask it.
Prime Minister. We would like to commend the government, first of all, on the significant investment in the city of San Fernando. Of course, the upgrade of Skinner Park. And of course, the start to the redevelopment of the waterfront, which for decades, it was only talk about starting it. And eventually, our government started this project for us in San Fernando. Prime Minister, what we would want to get from you is an update as to when phase 2 and phase 3 completion dates would be for this mega project for us in the city of San Fernando.
Okay, the person who knows the most about that is your MP. Minister Al-Rawi, could you, a brief, Minister Al-Rawi, Minister.
Yes, sir.
While we have Kiran on the floor, just for the benefit of the public who's listening and who are here, give a little synopsis of what he's talking about and try and answer his question.
Sure.
And you don't have the whole night.
Yes, Prime Minister. Thank you very much, Kiran, for your acknowledgement of the work led by the Prime Minister's desire to see it done. The San Fernando waterfront, as everyone is aware, is something that was talked about for upward of 40 years, but it was a rather nebulous concept. It was just the waterfront. It could not be disaggregated or separated into individual identifiable projects. What happened was, with the vision of the government, a lot of nagging by your MP, and the support of the Honorable Prime Minister, we were able to separate the waterfront redevelopment and development into separate projects. There is the classic development by way of landfilling at the wharf area. In the past, there was some 1.4 hectares of land filled without permission under a different government. and that was to be joined by 3.4 hectares of development in new land filling to create a peninsula which would very much look like what the movie town Invaders Bay development looked like. A place for hotels, for yachting industries, for new commerce, etc. That development required a certificate of environmental clearance. It required funding. It required a contractor to be sourced in proper procurement channels. And I'm very pleased to tell you that the certificate of environmental clearance has been obtained. It took 6 years to get the certificate of environmental clearance. The contractor is Van Org. That contract is expected to start in the month of April, as at last report. That project will take 6 months. 6 years to do 6 months of work, and they're going to be dredging the waterfront and harborways to create a passageway for vessels to come in. The water taxi moves to that side closer to the yacht club, and therefore we get a significant amount of landfill and area. We've already done the forward operating works. Ministry of Finance has its customs office there. The land development is in there. And that takes us to the second stage, which is Plaza San Carlos, otherwise known as the Wharf. Plaza San Carlos is at King's Wharf, not Queen's Wharf, which is in Port of Spain. And at the King's Wharf, there are a few identifiable projects. The old railway station at the end of the wharf, the customs facility, which is an addition to what is there, the Thorpe's Garage, the Black Cat Hotel, couple historical buildings, and the relocation of the PTSC turning facility. I'm pleased to tell you, the fishing port has started. The contractor is Warner Construction. I'm pleased to tell you that the contracts for Trinidad Railway and for Thorpe's and for Black Hat, those are coming to a close now under UDCOT. They expect in the month of April to May to begin those works. In the meanwhile, the private sector, much of that land is owned by Ansa Macal and other areas. They are in conversation with us. The third stage of the waterfront development, which you asked about the 3 stages, is the road from Skinner Park all the way to Plaza San Carlos. That roadway, as you know, has been widened. We started the work, even though we knew that there were commercial and other squatters in the way, and we started the compulsory acquisition exercise at the same time. So we didn't want to wait to clear first. We went on with the works. We tied in the water treatment facility, which is just at the back of Padmore Street. And that work has been defined to be, number 1, the housing development, which has been awarded to Karamat Engineering Services. As you know, they put out for tender 54 expressions of interest for 54 apartments. They only got a small 740 people saying they will buy it. So stage 1 was extremely profitable from expressions of interest. That work is expected to commence this financial year. The relocation and the redevelopment of the Hatters area. Under local government, we have got the IDB to express interest in treating with the landfill, which is the Labas, and the seawall, which has to be built, which goes out a further 12 meters. That has been finished. The same Van Org does that project, and we'll fill in the road. There is much more that we can add to that, but I'll leave it there, Prime Minister.
Well, if you put 1 more pound of cement down there, it will sink.
Well,
so
I'll end by saying, Prime Minister, a lot of that is cement to come. And San Fernando will be demanding its fair share. Thank you for your generosity to us, Prime Minister, and to you, Kiran Singh, for your support.
So that was 1 question, Kiran. You have 2 more.
Yes, Prime Minister. It's a well-known fact that San Fernando has statistically lower crime rates than the rest of the country. Fortunately for us in San Fernando.
Well, I'm very glad to hear that.
And of course, we must thank the hard-working efforts of the TTPS and the municipal police in that regard. Over the last couple of years, we did have almost a double intake of municipal police for the city of San Fernando. Unfortunately, we didn't see a like increase in the number of nightly and weekend patrols in downtown San Fernando, of course, and of course the wider area of the city. And of course, we are calling on your good office, Honorable Prime Minister, to how can we effect some increases in these patrols for our beloved city?
Well, one of the things I was talking to one of the analysts who have been analyzing our perpetual crime troubles, and they've pointed out to me that this country started to lose its way in managing the crime situation when the police service went on a 40-hour work week. Before that, police stations, that's what they're telling me, police stations literally man their districts in such a way that the police and the criminals were out at the same time. And most criminals try to get away in the dark in committing crime, and the daylight hours were relatively safe. Now, even though we have an above average number of police officers for the population compared to the international average, patrolling is substandard because the terms and conditions that operate caused us to have to add more bodies to the police service. In fact, some people have said it was a bad idea to come up with the municipal police. But that was the only way that we could have got more bodies out there to do exactly what you're saying is more patrols. But if you are saying that not enough patrolling is being done at nights, then it means, I would take it to mean, that even though we add more bodies, the same system is operating, where people are policing in the day and not policing in the night, and the criminals are operating in the night and sleeping in the daytime. So we need probably to review our operations so that the patrolling that you need is had from the human capital that exists in the population of police officers we have now in the borough and elsewhere. I guess that must have, everywhere else might have the same problem. Tulapuna might be telling me the same thing, or Diego Martin. The minister want to say a word.
Just very quickly on the municipal police, we're about to launch our data app, which will tell you where every single municipal police car is at any moment's notice, everywhere. And that way we have response time that will tell you you're 7 minutes out, 6 minutes out, 3 minutes out, 2 minutes out. We've grabbed the data to show us the daytime versus nighttime disaggregation, and we will be launching that by the end of March. This is a radical transformation in patrolling using technology. And the second thing that we're doing, which the mayor of San Fernando has agreed to, we're installing cameras at all public buildings because we amended the Evidence Act so that you don't need witnesses again. The CCTV can be the evidence for you. The third thing that the municipal police will be doing, which we will launch very shortly, is that we will be putting out mobile patrol units, mobile huts, as we do every carnival. Just across the road here, where you have a standing mobile post, we'll be moving from post to post. So the municipal police, in conjunction with the Minister of National Security, we're about to give you some fantastic products, which is part of local government reform.
I just want to say one thing. All of these technologies and all of these patrols, great, they're part of it. There's no substitute for dedicated foot patrol. Some policemen are required to walk the beat still, if only to interact with the people that they're policing. Having police cars brand new with the windows up, driving past people in the road, sometimes even when they're being flagged down, that does not help. I've had a lot of complaints from people in various parts of the country complaining that police car patrol driving through the area is not in fact a police patrol. So I want those who manage the police service to take that on board, and those of you in urban areas to understand that older urban areas than San Fernando and Port of Spain are still relying on well-resourced foot patrol, especially in sensitive districts?
Thank you, Prime Minister.
One more question.
Yes.
Last one from you, right?
Yes,
Good,
yes,
okay.
Prime Minister, thanks. We all know
And that's only because you represent a large cross-section of views, right?
Thank you, Prime Minister. Traffic congestion has been or used to be a perennial problem in the city of San Fernando. And of course, through the hard-working efforts of the Traffic Management Committee, we were able to alleviate that to a great extent over the last couple of years, and it will continues, of course, currently. The parking facilities have also improved with the parkade at the entrance to the hospital on the wharf. And of course, the wrecking has been discontinued, and we are very happy about that because at one point we had the most efficient wrecking service in the country, and that is no longer so. So we applaud the government for retracting the wrecking service.
But what about the illegal parking?
So far, we haven't had any serious problems concerning the illegal parking,
Okay.
Persons bracing the corners of the streets. So it's working pretty well. I think people are still fearful of the traffic wardens and police. They can still be issued with tickets, even though the wrecking service is not in operation. And that's fine.
But do you have short-term parking on your commercial streets?
Yes, on the outlying streets, parking on alternate days on one side of the street is permitted, and that is working. And we also have several private parking lots that are available for business persons and customers. And in fact, Prime Minister, the Chamber of Commerce instituted a park and ride system with the assistance of UDCOT, His Worship the Mayor, over the Christmas period of 2023, where customers and business persons were allowed to use a free shuttle service for downtown San Fernando while they parked at the secure parkade on the wharf. And it proved very successful. It took some time to garner some traction, but it did encourage business to come back to San Fernando, shopping to increase over the 2023 Christmas season. In fact, where business persons were applauding the initiative and thanking the government that we were able to see some business activity recreated in San Fernando during that period.
Okay. Some management taking place and there's some good results being had. So thank you very much for all of that.
Prime Minister, just
well,
one
hold on.
comment, sorry.
Time management issue here. We are about 9:35, and we have about 10 more minutes for some questions. So we'd like to get this line.
Kieran, I think, I'll tell you what, I know that you represent a broad set. We'll talk again later outside of the thing, right?
Thank you, Prime Minister.
And your MP is here just in case it was an MP question, right?
Thank you, Prime Minister.
Thank you very much for your input.
Thank you.
But before we go on, does anybody in here know who the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago is? Do you know what portfolio the Prime Minister has besides Prime Minister? I am the Minister for UDCOT. I run UDCOT as a ministry. And the fact that you don't know that is a good thing because there are no scandals coming your way. From the rebuilding of the hospital, the parliament, to today, yesterday we opened the Diego Martin Library. UDCOT has been doing tremendous development work around the entire country in the office of the Prime Minister. I just had to give you that tonight because I know you didn't know that. Carry on.
Yes, next question, please.
Good evening, Dr. Rowley, Nikolai Edwards, and as we say, I'm from Sando proper. Back in 2017, I would have appeared before you in a similar forum, bringing to you the issue of youth development in the country. I had asked for a meeting, that didn't happen, but I can say with confidence that between that time and present, I've seen significant development as it relates to young people, whether it's through the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Sport, or the Ministry of Youth, and I commend your government for that. There is still work to be done nonetheless. Now, there are young people, much like myself, who want nothing more than to really help in the development of Trinidad and Tobago, and they feel from various reasons that they are not allowed a pathway to do that. And sometimes it's in politics. In 2020, you would have introduced in the Parliament the Representation of the People Amendment Bill 2020. I personally was impressed by it because you answered the question of how long can we continue with the issue of campaign financing being a runaway horse and all of these issues surrounding that. However, we're in 2024. Granted that we did have COVID-19 and many things taking place since then, I personally have not seen much work being done in terms of bringing that piece of legislation, that bill, out of a joint select committee. I'm asking you, as the Prime Minister who introduced this piece of legislation, when can we see movement on this important issue, and if that can be done ahead of the next general election, even though it may not be fully proclaimed or operationalized, but at least the issue will be frontally tackled?
Thank you very much for that question, Nikolai. It's running the parliament, especially when you have a very narrow majority, you have to, is managing, it's like throwing balls in the air. Sometimes we'd like to call the parliament into session, but then you realize that the government is in the minority if you do that. And the government is never to be the minority in the parliament, because you know what that means. But because government has so much business outside on an ongoing basis, we have to make sure that those who work outside from time to time, that their absence doesn't put the government in a minority in the parliament. So we have to manage this legislative program. And that particular issue you mentioned came to the fore, was one of the earliest bills that we laid in the parliament. And we took it to Joint Select Committee, hoping that all of the members of parliament will have an input to be able to come to something. But you know how that goes. That too has failed to find any enthusiasm with our colleagues. In fact, it is my intention to bring that bill back, probably during this year. But I would like to get it done before we get out of this parliament that we are in. And you're correct in saying, even if it doesn't come into full force, and even if we can't get agreement, the government on its own should be able to make sufficient useful upgrades of the current law by way of amendment to allow the modernization of money in elections in Trinidad and Tobago. We are hoping that it will form part of the work that we'll do this calendar year. And by calendar year, I mean between now and December. If it doesn't get done before the parliament goes on recess in July, which I hardly think it would, because the committee has not yet, we may want to give it a bit more time in the committee and try to persuade our colleagues to, but you know how that goes. We have other people who are not as enthusiastic about these things. Even matters that they themselves brought to the parliament, which you think will attract attention, they oppose their own bills. And therefore, we can't be too hopeful that they will be enthusiastic in it, but it is something that we'll try to get done during this calendar year. Yes, I'm hearing you.
I say that with your government and yourself as Prime Minister, you're able to accomplish this. What it will do is ensure that the next generation of political aspirants or young people in general will be able to walk into a political system that is not fraught with the kind of issues that we have right now. And then we can have greater respect for our leaders who are walking the straight and narrow and being held accountable. So I urge you and your government to put this forward. Thank you.
You'll get no argument from me on that.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll have the lady next, who's been standing quite a while.
I don't mind terribly. Good evening, Honorable Prime Minister, and good evening, San Fernando. My name is Faith Jalazo. I am Miss Universe Trinidad and Tobago. So I give you my guarantee that I'll keep my question under 30 seconds. Start the timer. Honorable Prime Minister, many young people have had a cause for concern in the fact that many fields are oversaturated, but this hasn't fallen.
Many what?
Many young people have had a common cause for concern in the fact that many fields are oversaturated, but this hasn't fallen on deaf ears because there certainly have been implementations of strategies and designs made to make agriculture more accessible and more viable as a path of pursuit. My question is this. In spaces that are more urban and developed, such as the city of San Fernando, what are some of the ways that agriculture is being made continually accessible as a path of pursuit for young people?
Well, agriculture used to be known as the engagement and endeavor of drudgery, sweat and pain, muscular pain. That was how it was in my grandfather's time, my father's time, and in my own time. What we have been trying to do at the Ministry of Youth Development and the Ministry of Agriculture is to encourage the new agriculture to be a part of our exercise, which is agriculture without pain and drudgery, and in fact, it can be done even without sweat. So in some of our schools, my own constituency have encouraged it, and as you may know, I'm the only prime minister who ever had and has in his office an advisor on agriculture separate and apart from the Ministry of Agriculture. I have Dr. John Arlene in my ministry ever since I became prime minister, driving the same sort of thing, where we are encouraging a kind of agricultural production and the systems that involve technology. The Ministry of Youth Development can speak loudly about that. Right now, we are almost, we are close to completion of the shade house projects, where we will grow vegetables of the highest quality under controlled environment in Chagaramas. We want to use Chagaramas as a pilot project. We should start planting in that project in April, which is about 3 weeks away. And then when the new farmers who are being trained, the young people like yourself, can see what it is. We're doing this in conjunction with the government and people of Guyana, where they are ahead of us. I was able to visit them not too long ago to actually see, and the numbers I'm hearing from them, these new farmers are doing much better than the traditional agricultural systems. You don't need acres, even a small space, like in the city, even in the backyard. Once you have a few square feet, you can do some technological agriculture, and you can produce some of the best vegetables and other things. And the market will soon realize that the products are coming from a different kind of endeavor, which is not as painful and hopefully is as financially lucrative as the old agricultural system. So we are engaged in promoting the new systems. And at the next conversation, which should take place in a few weeks' time before the end of the month, I will ask the Minister of Youth Development to speak specifically about this aspect of youth encouragement into the new agriculture.
Thank you. I have the next question on this side.
Honorable Prime Minister, my name is Derek Smith, and all protocols observed. I am here to give you some good news tonight.
I could do with some of that.
I think so, Prime Minister. First of all, I'd like to take my hat off to one of the best MPs that San Fernando has ever seen. And under your watch, sir, thank you very much for giving San Fernando the much needed.
Who is that?
Terrence De Elsing. Right next to him. Prime Minister, I am bringing some good news to you. San Fernando sits down on the same reserves of oil from the Cretaceous that has been said from ever since. I got permission as an ex-president of the Geological Society. Of course, I'm a geologist like yourself, but I'm also a businessman. So I'm telling you that we need to bring this to the fore. I decided that I have a very close relationship with all the different mayors of the city of San Fernando, and that we should pursue this. What I would like to see is the Minister of Energy spend a little time of his time in San Fernando at the office, so that we could have more engagement, proper engagement. Secondly, Prime Minister, one of your objectives, which is an excellent one, by the way, is to get that gas from Dragon Field. Now, I have been working for 48 years, sir, And part of what my 48 years around the world and in Trinidad has been at Trinma. I actually worked on Manatee. I also worked at Loran. I worked in Venezuela for some years. I have the man of business here with me. So I'm not talking the talk, I'm walking the talk tonight. So I would like you to meet him before you leave to go up to Port of Spain, who can make this agreement go faster with the objective that you have to get that gas into our Point Lisa's industry downstream, which I also play a big role from another perspective of my group of companies. I like to help, and I wish to offer myself and my services free of charge, sir, so that I can make the city of San Fernando the busy city with this president here. This president here is one of the best we ever had. We have an excellent MP. We have low crime rates. We have everything set up really nice. We have an excellent Minister of Health who's making sure that SWAHA gives the service that we need to give. I'll take my hand off to him, all right? And we also have a very, very hard-working Minister of National Security. Sir, I would like you, I remember seeing you in the Hyatt once proposing that you get the security companies aligned with your plans, sir. Keep up the good work, forget the naysayers. And I am just saying, sir, that I want to push that Dragon oil field for you, sir. I used to represent Chavez, not Maduro, but this guy represents Maduro, all right? And I would like you to meet him before you leave to go up Port of Spain, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before you go, let me ask you a question. Is it that you're proposing that drilling be done under San Fernando to hit the Cretaceous?
Yes, sir. Let me tell you something, Prime Minister. When I came out from university in '76, they were saying we had no more oil. Myself and Dr. Krishna Prasad, who is still alive, has proved that wrong on several occasions. I particularly, sir. So I am saying to you, it comes in waves every 30 years. And I'm telling you here, you will remember this night that Derek Smith told you that there's oil under San Fernando, and it is seeping as we speak. And everywhere we have found oil in Trinidad, the history will show you, from since Krugler days, and you know what I'm talking about, is where the oil was seeping, so I rest my case.
I also want to ask you another question.
Yes.
Do you have as much confidence in that as Krishna had in the Furial?
Sir, we have 670 in S670, sir. That is the Furial well we drilled in Trinma. And we have not, up to today, done the analysis of that well. We have a gold mine sitting on in Trinma. Let your Minister of Energy come and listen to the experts in South, where the industry grew for the last 48 years, sir. I'm telling you, I am a businessman out of the industry of the oil industry. So I know the work. I'm saying to you, I want to see your dream come true with the Dragon gas deal, sir. I know everybody there. And I bring a man here. He just happened to be in the country, right? Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much for coming. And I think you should talk to the Minister of Energy and ask him to make sure he talks to you. But we have a lot that we can talk about, but not tonight.
Prime Minister, we have about 10 more minutes before the end, and we have time for one more
We
question.
have someone by the mic there. We have about 3 more questions if we keep them short and quick.
Pleasant good night to the beautiful people of San Fernando and to you, Dr. Rowley.
Good night.
My name is Deshaun Daniel. I'm from the constituency of San Fernando East. Firstly, I would like to commend your government, in particular the Ministry of Youth Development and National Service, for the number of initiatives you all would have rolled out over the past couple of years. As a young person, it brings me great joy to know that my government prioritizes the development of young persons. That leads me to asking, Prime Minister, in recognizing the importance that young people play in the development of our country, what plans do you have to engage and solicit the opinions and ideas of us so that we can become contributing members to the decision-making process?
All right. My answer to that is very simple. For the first time under any government, there is a Ministry of Youth Development and National Service. That minister is known as Oliver. You ever read Oliver Twist? Please, sir, can I have some more? That ministry is doing all the representation that is required to ensure that the youth aspect of government's programs and government's vision is resourced to bring about what you are aiming at there. So having established the ministry, I think I have the right minister there, and his energies and his successes are such that the programs can be realized. So the door is open. I just heard Nikolai here. Nikolai was an office holder in youth development here. I'm hoping that the energy that he has, that he would talk to the minister and make himself useful now and not wait to be a political leader 20 years from today. Get involved. Get involved. It's our country, it's our business. The door is wide open. Get involved. Okay? So having established the ministry, ensuring that the cabinet resource the ministry, at my level, I've done what has to be done. And the minister is doing his work. The door is open to you. I hope the next time I see you, you could tell me what you're doing with the ministry, either as an NGO, as a contributor, or just as a citizen taking part in the opportunities that are available. Yeah.
Prime Minister, we have 5 minutes left. Take one more question.
Honorable Prime Minister, good evening. Lian Shand, Gulview. I am a full supporter of the government's position that entrepreneurship is the way forward for livelihood of citizens. The reality, though, is that startups could be very expensive, and in accessing funds from banks, for example, we see very, very high interest rates for new businesses in comparison to already established ones. The rental of links machines, the 3% commission on your income when someone pays with Visa, stuff like that. It makes it very difficult for an entrepreneur now coming in to be competitive, very difficult for an entrepreneur to be successful, especially when you are competing against already established businesses. So my question would be if the government could consider negotiating with the banks, similar to what was done in COVID-19, where we could have facilities to assist entrepreneurs to not have this huge burden at the very start of their business. That's the first part. The other part is with International Women's Day on Friday, advocating in a large way for financial independence for women. Would the government consider policy and legislation regarding the equitable award of government contracts to women-owned businesses, as we see in some first world countries and in the Middle East? Thanks for the chance to ask my questions.
Those are difficult ones. I'm sure conversation between the people who impact your initiatives in the way you've described and government officials are useful conversations which we could have. But I can't tonight give you a guarantee that those conversations will bear the kinds of fruit that you anticipate. I have had the opportunity as Minister of Housing to try to negotiate banks' interest reduction for low-cost housing. And with the best effort in the world, we could not move the banks to accepting that that is a corporate responsibility in a society, that they will be better off assisting you to grow by giving up a penny now to earn $1 later on. We would undertake the conversations. I expect that somewhere in there, the Minister of Finance may have persuasive powers. So he's here tonight. He would have heard you. The Minister of Trade, you know, is very energetic and very supportive of what you have said. So now that you've raised it in this way, I will talk to them to see whether there's anything we could initiate. But it is usually pushing against a very stiff wall to get people who have their fingers on a stream of revenue to give it up. But I would like to say to corporate Trinidad and Tobago that the assistance to young people or to new entrepreneurs is an assistance to yourself. Because if they grow and become successful, the society is better off and the banking system is better off in a society that is better off. So giving up a little to get a lot later on, to me, is good business. But the government doesn't have too much that we could do, but we certainly can do something. That question about a policy of what should go to certain people. In our society, we have to be careful because any attempt to give a hand up to any specific group of person is met with screams of discrimination. Because some people can't see beyond that. If certain people in the society need particular help, a particular kind of help, then it is reasonable that that help should be made available once it is transparent. And there probably is room there for us to think along those lines. And we will not shy away from it if you know, it is something that will bring about some improvement in our society. One of the things that you would have observed, and I want you to observe, that this government that I have led since 2016, we have not been shy in taking decisions that are deemed to be unpopular once those decisions are in the best of the public interest. And young people, young entrepreneurs, there are some government opportunities with taxpayer money available. I will ask you to look to see what is there and try and see if that could help in some way to get you off the ground, because we really want to get you started, right?
Prime Minister, we've been given a little extra time, so we take the last
One more question and we can wrap up after that.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you very much.
My name is Dr. Anthony Elias. Oh, and I quickly look around and see some of your ministers looking to figure out what I'm going to be telling you. Mr. Prime Minister, my schoolmate Derek preceded me, and I was very happy when he talked about you having, basically, using my words, that you're having a long life to continue what you're doing. I would wish you the same, Mr. Prime Minister, and I would openly say, where you have
so that is the condition under which I'll have this long life?
Sorry?
I don't accept the terms, eh?
Okay.
I will accept the wish of a long life, but I don't accept the terms under which you're offering it.
Okay, Mr. Prime Minister, you just said it, that you've led a government which has not been able, which has not refused to take hard decisions, as unpopular as they are. I don't intend to ask any question, but rather to make a suggestion. In the last week, I have been exposed to 5 persons who have gotten the land and housing tax. 2 of them are my neighbors. I haven't gotten mine yet. And what is rather strange is that the one with the smaller house, with the lesser land, has been assessed at a way higher figure than the older house with the greater amount of land, which is in a better condition. My recommendation, sir, is that I would hate to think, and I'm very open about it, that this land tax can cause a possibility that your government may be voted out of power. And I would really, really not have to live with what is out there for me as compared to what I have right now. So my recommendation is, there must have been so far, or there will be a lot of people objecting. My suggestion is, rather than invoke the entire tax, maybe we should start at 50%. Those who object and those who are sorted out with an incremental increase of maybe 10% every year, because it's going to be easier for people to work with that, rather than having to face this brunt one time. In a sense, it was done with gasoline, with fuel. While the rises were a little steep, they were graded in. And you don't have to convince me why you have to put in the tax. I understand, I accept it. I think most people do. But unfortunately, to suddenly have to find yourself paying 6, 7, 8, 9,000, people are not comfortable. So it's just a recommendation that I'd like to make to you to consider.
Thank you very much for your recommendation. People of Trinidad and Tobago, I speak to you as an office holder, as a citizen. And all I will ask of you, before you get your anger boiled up, your choice of where you'll put your finger election day and so on, before you do that, let us agree that we would look at it like other things with a certain amount of fact, a certain amount of reason, and a certain amount of self-interest. The removal of land and building taxes. This has been going on for how many years, Minister of Finance? Since 2009, right? It is 15 years that a tax that you were required to pay that is on the law books, you have not been asked to pay it. 15 years. I have not heard one person compute how much you have saved and not paid for 15 years. To come to what is required now to begin to collect the tax, we have gone through a number of computations to get to a point where we've said that we will levy a tax that is affordable. Yes, it is difficult to go to every single house and do a valuation as you had to do in most cases. The two houses you mentioned, one might be small, one might be big, one plot might be bigger than the other. But the formula is based on the rentable value. So the bigger house may not be able to command as attractive a rent as a prettier, nicer, cleaner, smaller house. But in the same neighborhood, they should be in the same ballpark, if not identical. And that's why the role would be a public document and that adjustments could be made. And I will tell you, provision in the law is there for if a person genuinely believes that the valuation, that rentable value is out of whack, that you can go make a complaint to the tribunal, but it's in a system of comply and complain. Because if we say complain and don't pay, then everybody will not play and complain. But if it's a system of comply and complain, you pay it, you're complaining, the tribunal will look at it. And if the tribunal reviews it, then you get a credit towards the next year's tax. That's the system. I am not one to believe that it is the best thing to ask people to pay tax. But the way this tax is being held up as a burden, I think it is a little overdone. Especially if after 15 years, you have been given that break. And when you had said to me, well, now is not the right time, I know what that means. It will never be the right time. Never. And if in fact there are situations where the system has generated extraordinary burdens, there's provision there for that to be looked at in a proper way and to be adjusted in the most reasonable way by the authority which is appointed by the president. So we're not acting vice. And many people are still mistaking the the valuation as the tax. The valuation figure that you'd be given there in thousands, that is the rentable valuation. The tax is 3% of that. And those tax calls are now going out, starting when? Last Friday. So the actual tax that is required to be paid, given that all the complaints you've been hearing, those would have been complaints about the valuation. Before this attempt to collect at 3%, London building taxes was 7.5%. We don't have time now to go into it because we've gone over it 100 times, but there are some people in our society who are deliberately misrepresenting it. Before, the full value at 7.5% was the tax. We are now saying 3% of the rentable value. So I know nobody likes to pay tax, but if that is the basis on which we will change the government and put it in the hands of other people who will wreck and ruin the country, let it be said that it would have been done with your eyes wide open. Because we have gone out of our way. It is political, a whole election was run on that. We've gone out of our way to say we've reached the point where we can reintroduce the collection of this affordable tax for a particular purpose. If you hear somebody saying that the tax is $9,000 or $25,000, then they have something that attracted that tax. And for the people who are voting, if you don't have no house, you have no tax to pay. And if you have a little house in the corner, your tax is eminently affordable. It's $200 for the year. And that is the tax that covers nominally the police, the fire service, the mosquito you kill, the rats you have to kill, the roads to repair, all of those things. And he said, okay, you with minimal means is each according to his ability to pay. So don't join anybody and take up anybody fire rage and drink anybody bush tea about how much thousand they have to pay. It is because the system has identified that you are better able to pay a little bit more. That's what it is. That's what it is. I'm telling you finally, the vast majority of voices that you hear attacking property tax in Trinidad and Tobago are voices that have property outside of Trinidad and Tobago. And they are first in line to pay it out there. Probably on US dollars that they spirit away from here that should be in Trinidad and Tobago. So don't get me going on that tonight. Nobody is oppressing anybody with this tax. It is required to improve the quality of life in the local districts. And therefore, the government that I lead, we campaign on this. We have a mandate for it. The majority of people in this country are sensible, law-abiding people who see the benefit of it. And we believe that such persons will continue to see the benefit of it. Let us not get carried away with the emotions of other people who believe that if they say it loudly enough and threaten enough, that the government will not do it and they will succeed at the polls. This is not about the polls, it's about the country, and it's about whither goes Trinidad and Tobago. That's all I can say tonight. If they are inordinate, I'm sure there'll be situations where people will believe that they've been hard done by, but there's provision for it to be reviewed and to be looked at. What more can one ask for in a civilized society? Thank you very much for raising it.
Yes. Prime Minister, I give you the floor now to wrap up. You proceed to 10:15.
We're into our last 5 minutes, sir. Dr. Elias?
Yeah, just Mr. Prime Minister, I just want to thank you for your explanation. I didn't want you to get heated up. I don't want you to get a heart attack. Can't afford that at this stage. No, but the issue here is not, I don't think, well, you'll always have people who don't want to pay tax, but I think the issue is more.
I am one of them. Eh?
Well, I am too, so I haven't even
But
got my valuation.
I know what my responsibility to society is.
My concern was just how they came across, because if I can give you an example of a house in St. Joseph Village at $20,000 a month rent, come on.
Well, in that case, if that is deemed to be, because you know there are some houses in the country that are rented like that. But if that is deemed to be an inordinate assessment done by commercial valuers, then all that is required is for it to be reviewed through the tribunal system and let them be the final arbiter.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
I just wanted to get a point across, Mr. Prime Minister. Thank you.
Thanks for your contribution.
Well, we've gone past the time that we've set. All that's left is for me to thank those of you who are here in front of me, who have made the journey to come and sit here and take part in this exercise. I trust that some things would have been learned tonight, some information would have been gleaned, and that as we go along, we know a bit more about the many issues of our country and not be unidimensional. We know that crime and criminality are up front in many people's agenda. We know that we are all exposed to it, but we simply want to say that there's a whole lot more that we should be concerned about as we fight the crime and the criminality that we face every day. So thank you for coming, and those of you at home or wherever you are who took in the proceedings, I trust that our national conversation, the quality of what we discuss, the facts that we imbibe in a time when misinformation and outright lies are public policy in some areas, that we will focus on the facts to make sure that the decision making is transparent, based on facts, and in the best interest of the wider national community. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming out.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Just a reminder, in case you still have written questions, you can leave them at the Citizens Facilitation Desk. And our conversations with the Prime Minister has now come to an end. I want to thank you, members of the San Fernando community, for your participation. And on behalf of the Office of the Prime Minister, I am your host, Marc-Andre Augustus, bidding you good night.
For those of you who didn't get the opportunity here or elsewhere, it is my intention to have a few more of these gatherings in different parts of the country. Hopefully we'll have another one before the end of the month, and a few more to give you the opportunity to interact like this. Thank you very much for participating.
Thank you.
This is TTT, Live for Local.